So
Yeah.
but this takes us into, we've got just a couple more records to go. I want to talk, you mentioned Broken Compass. I want to talk about that since it's Spencer Chamberlain deep dive on your discography, not just Underoath.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, I was in contact with you around that time. I did the bio for the record, so I have some familiarity with what was happening. But I remember a lot of the press at the time focusing somewhat on, I remember there was an anecdote somewhere that was, you had 2 gold records on your wall that you were counting out pocket change to, buy a burrito or whatever. And that was that was kind of where things were as Sleepwave was coming together. Let's talk a little bit about that.
I mean, there was a long time in between, and I think me and my buddy Steven had been working on music and we were having fun doing it. I just think it went through way too much before it took off. Like, you would have thought we could have just picked up and gone, but like there were so many different labels and different demos and different people, and it just was a great learning process. I look at it as that. And I think it was great to get out there and start at the bottom again. It could have taken a different direction, a different form. And we always joked about, like, we could just make a medical record and just be fucking big and keep going. But we didn't want to do that, and we just wanted to, some of that stuff was stuff I was working on the side. Like I told you, I'm always writing music, and some of it was already working on it when I was doing Disambiguation, just like different, it wasn't so aggressive, but, and I think it just took us a long time to get off of our feet, and we sank, myself and Steven both sank all of our personal money into it, trying to get it off the ground. And I think that's where the anonymity came from, where we're like counting pocket change at the time, because before we started touring, me and him had both dumped so much money into gear and recording. We were paying for our own demos. Like, labels would come down, like Atlantic would come down and watch us play and be, this is great, and draw up a contract and then disappear. And then, like, we're stuck, like confused, and, all this different stuff was supposed to happen. And we were just spending a lot of money, just paying our bills and our mortgages. He had a house and I had a house, and we were getting a live band together and buying the gear for it and buying vans and buying trailers. And, like, when you don't have a label doing that, it gets to be really expensive. And then touring it was just a different time. It was right before the shift of, like, a lot of bands kind of doing the more aggressive songs that are mostly singing. Like, the scene wasn't there yet. I don't think there was, that yet. It was just a little too early, and we got stuck touring with a lot of bands that were bands that wanted to tour with Underoath. And I don't think we got, it was just tough. And the minute the record came out, we couldn't land a tour that we could afford to do,
That's the other thing about starting from the bottom. And with you come from having the overhead of a really established musician, but then getting the resources on the road of a bunch of 19-year-olds, and 19-year-olds don't have mortgages. And
it was tough. It was really tough. And we did a lot of great tours. We went around the world. We played Wembley with Bring Me the Horizon and Soundgarden in Australia, and we did a lot of cool shit. And
I saw you at the Palladium, and I actually don't remember who you were on tour with, because I remember
Taking Back Sunday.
Oh, okay, that's what that was.
Yeah. I think the next record would have been great. It was the same thing. It was a chasing safety thing. Like, we got in, we thought, it didn't sound like what we sounded like after it was done, and the songs kind of changed a little bit. And we were, it was the first time we'd ever been in that kind of situation where there was a lot on the line. And I think the unreleased Sleepwave material that I have on my hard drive is the best Sleepwave material. And it was really like, we figured it out what we wanted to do. And we would get these tours, and we'd go on tour and barely make enough. And in between tours, me and Steven wouldn't go home. We parked at Matt Goldman's. And we were actually working with Matt Goldman on some really fucking cool shit. And then it just, like, between the drugs and the alcohol, and I think getting on tour with a bunch of guys, we hired a bunch of friends. And it's like in Underoath, I was always the wild guy. And then going on tour with a bunch of people that like, oh, there's no one to hide stuff from.
Yeah.
Not like it's good to hide things, but like there was
Yeah.
no, I was like, man, I'm like the most tame out of all these people. And it was destructive and negative. And from the crew, like, because even our friends, even the crew was our friends because we couldn't afford a lot. So it was like pretty poisonous, I think, even though we thought we were having a good time. Like, it was pretty brutal. And I remember times being like deathly hungover until like the first note of the song, like shaking, thinking I can't play, like it was just survival. And it was dirty rock and roll lifestyle of just stringing it together, and I think what was going to come next would have been awesome. And it just fell apart. It was just like, it was too destructive, I think, for me. I think I was, when the Underoath thing came back, I think it saved my life in a way. It like was a crutch for me to be able to get off all the drugs and have people around that I always looked at as like not like the people I would hang out with at home as much, and like I have to keep myself in check, but I needed that, And I think with Sleepwave, I think I needed that kind of structure of like some super uptight Christian dudes to be around when I was going through some of that stuff. And I think, in hindsight, I look back at, we're all men now, and even the guys that were doing the Sleepwave stuff were in better places now. But it was just a weird time, I think, and it was, timing sucked. And when the record came out, we sat still for like months on end. Like, we had a song on the radio and we couldn't tour because we couldn't land the tour. The tours we did land, we couldn't afford to do. And it was just like, like fall, like you missed the first stair and you fall down the whole staircase kind of vibe, and I think, like I said, I think the shit on my hard drive is the best that no one ever got to hear. And I think about it all the time. Sometimes I'll be like, I don't have a big online following because I don't really use Instagram or Twitter, and I never had a Facebook, but I always think about like, what if I just put those album 2 stuff up just for people to have, just because it was rad, and I don't think anyone will ever hear it.
And that would be the moment in the quarantine era.
I know, and I don't know if I legally am allowed to do anything.
There's that.
I'm sure I get in trouble somewhere. Any good idea I have, but that just kind of. But man, we could. That we were really good live though. Like we figured it out.
I have no reason to bullshit you, especially now that you're back in Underoath.
Yeah.
But you were. That show that I only saw you the one time, but it was visceral, and all of that sort of danger that you described that was going on behind the scenes, as unhealthy as it is, it was also one of those things that you could see was fueling that performance.
Yeah, we were
had an edge to it that was exciting.
Dude, and I remember one of my dear friends, Greg, you had mentioned Dillinger Escape Plan before. He came to the San Francisco show, and we had built our own lights, kind of a local band move, but we just didn't want to play with like house lights on, and we ran it by every band that we toured with, and like we played to a click, so we ran the lights off of our Ableton ourselves, and they were just analog, like what we loved, like yellow analog shit. And like I remember Greg coming up and he's just like, dude, it's like you guys are a headlining band that no one's ever heard of. And I remember him saying that to me, and he's like, it's so fucking good. Like, you guys should be doing your own headlining shows. And I'm like, yeah, but every time we try, it's like, it's not full. It's not great. It's like, it was on the cusp of being something cool, I think. And I think we needed another record to get there, but I think it was just timing. It has a way of working itself out. It was I don't think we could have kept living that way. I don't think, it was getting weird, and people were fighting a lot, and I think a lot of that had to do with all the substances being used, and dudes ended up some of the guys ended up in rehab for a year after all that stuff, and like completely different life now. And so it's all for the better. I think.
Yeah, and there's some great balance, I think, because in hearing and listening to you right now, I'm thinking about how, you come out of one situation where, and perhaps understandably, you had some, man, I wish everyone wasn't so uptight and that people could loosen up and, we could party a little bit and this wouldn't be such a big deal. And then you get in another situation where you're like, man, I wish somebody was in control right now.
Which is
insane.
it's
Like,
exactly
where's the adult in the room? And it's like,
Exactly.
having lived through both experiences, I would imagine that brings you to a place of balance where you can
it's very
understand the
balanced.
importance of all of it.
Yeah, it's very, and like Underoath has a great time. Those guys are obviously completely different than they were back in the day too.
Right.
They're all, married with kids and way less uptight, and they enjoy some drinking and hanging out and having a good time. And it's definitely responsible human beings being responsible human beings, but still having a good time. And
Balance.
Balance is a great thing that is overlooked a lot.
That's
in our job.
That's what the Star Wars trilogy was supposed to be all about. Bring balance to the Force. Okay,
Exactly.
so that brings us to Erase Me, which is then all these other moments in your life and career and how they're so intertwined. That's another thing about this genre. And it's interesting. And I think, this being kind of the pilot, like the first deep dive episode I've done with really great bands, I think this intertwining of the personal and the musical is inescapable. Like, you can't talk about the career moments without talking about what's going on in your life, because those records at their best are a reflection of who you were and who you are,
Exactly.
So
and I agree.
And go ahead.
And I think that's exactly why I had such a hard time with Underoath when we broke up, is because there's a bit of identity crisis, because you are those albums. Like, those Underoath albums were me and Aaron, like, that's being the mouthpiece of a band is like very personal. And then that's all of a sudden stopped and taken away from you. It's like 5 minutes ago, while I was on that stage, I was the guy from Underoath, and walking off, I wasn't. I was just a dude that put out songs at one point, and I wanted to keep making music, and they didn't. And I dedicated most of my life at that point to these guys, and I was just like fucking confused, and like I felt fucked. I was like, man, I am screwed. That was the one time I was like, I should have listened to my dad and gone to college instead. Like, it was that moment, and I was like, fuck. And I think that's exactly what it is with this kind of music, is you are, maybe not every band, but at least I know us and a lot of our friends, it's like you are singing about personal experiences, and it's very personal, and it's painting a picture of your life, and that it's exactly what you're going through at that time, and that's what it is. And leading up to Erase Me is like, it's those moments, like Aaron going through divorce and me getting off drugs, and the band getting back together and dealing with all those different feelings, and that is that record, in like a nutshell. It's everything I could have. It was better than anything I could imagine it would have been at that time. Like, I listened to that record the other day in the gym. This was before the quarantine, obviously, and I hadn't listened to it a long time. I was like, I still wouldn't change a thing on it for what we did. I was like, it's exactly what we wanted. We sat down and said, the word "not under oath enough" doesn't exist. So when you listen to heavy music, what the fuck do you want to hear? When you're driving down the highway and you want to put on a heavy record, that's what this has got to be. And we didn't leave until that's what it was. And yeah, it's like, it sounds selfish to say, but it should be your favorite heavy record. If you're making a heavy record, it should be your favorite one, or you shouldn't put it out.
And would you say this is the first record that you've made that you wouldn't change a thing on?
I don't think I would really change any of them, even though I look back and there's things I regret on all of them. And I think that's what fires you to do more. But I think, it's only been 2 years. So right now I'm like, no, that record's great for exactly what it was. Right. In the time that it came out and where we were as people. And I think the next one will be completely different. And I think Underoath will always do that. I think I want to compare it to the 9 Inch Nails vibe of like, you never know what you're going to get, but you're still going to love 9 Inch Nails, Yeah. And that's what I hope for Underoath fans. But I think that I don't think it'll be Erase Me Part 2. And I love that record. And then listening to Disambiguation the first time the other day, minus one song, I'm like, I fucking love that record. I listened to it, I was like, fuck, this is awesome. You know, because at that time we thought that was exactly what we wanted to do, and it was. And that's why when I go back and hear these records, besides They're Only Chasing Safety, I feel like all of them, I'm like, at that time, that's exactly what we wanted to do, and it's perfect for that time in our life.
That's the best possible outcome any artist could have.
Yeah. And I'm not saying our records are perfect.
I know exactly what you mean.
I'm not being cocky.
The records aren't perfect. They're a perfect representation of the band.
Where we were. The perfect representation of where we were at that time. And I think it's going to be completely different on the next one. You know, I can tell. You know.
Well, dude, that's a perfect place to wrap up. We just hit it. Not only did we get to the last record, but we got to a nice summary of.
Yeah. And just, I guess the main thing is you never know what to expect from Underoath, because I sure as hell don't.